Good afternoon, folks. Welcome along to another episode of Friday Beers, this time Meet the Homebrewers. Homebrewing has become quite popular during Prohibition in South Africa for obvious reasons. So in particular, welcome along to all of those looking to get started in homebrewing. It can be intimidating and a bit of a minefield at first, but you'll find that brewers are quite friendly and willing to help. So please ask all the questions you like. With the homebrewing stores opening up again this week, I feel it's a great time to focus on the homebrewing sector. And that'll no doubt see a massive growth this year. If you missed Wednesday's episode of Fool's School, be sure to watch that replay. Even the most seasoned brewer would have learned something from Brad Smith of Beer Smith's talk. After the show, I actually spoke to Brad quickly, and he mentioned that while homebrewing in the States has seen a bit of a decline in recent years, it has again grown during lockdown, and that's in a country that can still sell alcohol. So yeah, interesting times. I'm joined today here by Cam Gray, outgoing SouthYeasters President with a special interest in low ABV beers, Danie Odendaal, who has years of brewing experience, both as a home brewer and a professional brewer, and has recently been experimenting with some local grains and interesting ingredients. And finally, Matt Hurst, President of the Helderberg Homebrew Club, specializing in big ABV beers. So welcome along, guys. Thanks for joining today. Let's change the view here.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike.
Cheers. Happy Friday, everyone.
So I see everyone's got a beer. I got a beer. What are we drinking today?
We go light it up.
Yeah. So I've actually got a light lager. It's the last of my commercial beers from the back of the fridge. It's CBC light lager. So, but I've got plenty of homebrew to go after this. So
that's a good 4 p.m. starter beer, eh, for a Friday.
Exactly. That was the thought. Don't start on the 10%.
What are you starting on, Matt?
16.5.
So also not starting on the 10%, eh?
No. Boring.
What is it, 16.5%?
Stout. Yeah, with vice yeast, interestingly. But we can get to that later. Quite an interesting story.
I'm also starting with a beer with vice yeast. It's the Florida Weisser, which is supposed to be brewed with a clean yeast. But I didn't have any US05, but I did have some WB06 slurry from a Weiss beer that I brewed. So I fermented it cold, hoping that none of the phenolics, the sort of cloviness would come through from that yeast, but it's still a bit present. It's fine. The fruit, if I added more fruit, it probably would have been hidden better. Yeah. And Danie.
So what fruit did you add? Sorry, Mike, what fruit did you add?
I added some blueberries, strawberries, and blackberries. I think you can watch the video on my channel. We did a brew day video of it. I can't remember. I think it was strawberries, blueberries, and blackberries. But I only added a kilo of each.
Okay.
Only added like 3 kgs into 20 liters, and I think like 4 or 5. No, it needed to be more. It's hidden. Danie, what are you drinking?
I'm having one of these, my Jackal and Hops.
Nice.
That I've collaborated with OC Brewing with Gavin. It's one of the last. There's only 3 left that I've got. But I think there's still a few in lockdown at different places. So
Brendan had a few on the best.
I'm looking forward to trying to get some after lockdown. I really want to try that one.
I would have shared with you, Cam, but obviously I had a few, but since lockdown happened, I decided to drink them all instead. So sorry about that. We'll have to get some more.
Stocks are dwindling fast. Yeah?
It was very nice, hey, Danie. Tell us a bit about it, because it had sorghum, malt, cassava. What else?
Yeah, so it was a homebrewers revolution idea that Gavin got. Homebrewers, different homebrewers every kind of 2 months to brew a beer. I had the honor of being first. So I thought we'd jump in with something a bit different. As far as I know, there hasn't been a cassava beer here in South Africa. And essentially, I did a decoction brew where I did the sorghum and cassava separately.
Yeah.
As a decoction. And then I combined that with some wheat and Munich malt. There was basically no pale malt in this brew. So the conversion at liquefaction during decoction, and then allow the Munich malt with the little bit of beta amylase and alpha amylase enzyme there to do the rest of the conversion. And then, yeah, the big thing in here is cryo hop, which I think, just jumps out, giving you lots of hop flavor without giving you too much of that grainy grassiness. If you think
So, I mean, that's for all the new people that have joined here, that's probably a pretty advanced beer. I mean, there's all sorts of terms, their decoction and stuff. Just take me through the cassava. Did you just boil the root, or how did you make the cassava?
No, so basically, we used processed cassava. So if you look at roots, cassava is essentially like a root. It grows in the tropical areas. It's the third largest starch source in the world. So if you've had tapioca before, you've had cassava unknowingly. And then basically I got some that's used in the food industry. I got some local cassava from that. And you can use it in 3 different ways. You can either take the root, chop it up, and then brew with that. It gives you lots of processing issues, got lots of fibers in it and that.
Yeah.
Then the second way is using it as a flour. So you actually dry the root, and then you actually mill it and you make a flour from it. And then the third route is the more processed way, and that's actually, you actually separate a lot of the fibers from it, and you have a high concentration of the starch. Okay. And then you have a neutral product that you can then use. Big thing there, the gelatinization temperature is up to 85 degrees Celsius. So just using a normal decoction up to 71, there is chances that you could leave some of the starches behind. So, yeah.
So do you gelatinize it first then? Before you add the grain?
So I basically did the sorghum. I used a local sorghum maltster here in Krugersdorp that specializes in doing very high enzyme sorghum malts. They do Saladin boxes, so they do a proper maltings, and then I combined that with the cassava, and then basically heated it up from 65, and I just kind of stepped it up to make sure that we get the liquefaction to happen. And then at the end of that, I basically mashed that liquid into a colder portion of my Munich malt and wheat and a little bit of crystal malt, and then went through the steps again from 63, and then I had a stand 61 and kept the stand there to make sure that all the starch then gets chopped up.
You did quite a bit of playing with that recipe. I mean, I think when I was up there just before lockdown started, you had a previous batch that you'd done, a homebrew batch that you'd done as well, right?
Yeah. So what I had to take in mind is that we were going to brew on a commercial system.
Yeah.
And once, because sorghum doesn't actually have husks on it that can give you filterability, and then combining that still with the cassava, I was worried about stuck mashes and things like that. So I did try and emulate that on my little grain fodder that I've got to get that right. I have done a brew since that then, where I combined a brew in a bag type of solution in my grain fodder, and there I used 45% sorghum, 20% cassava, and 20% millie meal. I did a lockdown brew. Yeah, it did give me some issues, but I
made a stew.
I'll pour it just now, and you guys can have a look at it. So, it has quite well.
Apiwa is saying that she still needs to try your cassava beer.
I'll keep one. I'm sure they.
Tell her to write to the government representatives and tell them that she wants to try it. So maybe they'll stop prohibition so she can try it. Just for my reference, sorry, Mike. Danie, most beers are just malted barley, right? So what does the cassava and the sorghum bring to the beer? Why did you, I mean, it sounds like quite a complex thing. Why did you add those?
So the cassava is used quite a bit into Africa as a brewing resource. So it's a lot in either the wet root, obviously it doesn't grow here in South Africa, or the flour that's predominantly, and then you've got the starches up. It's actually quite a neutral flavor in the brew, so you can actually get away with using quite a big proportion of it without giving too much flavor. The sorghum has got a very unique earthy graininess to it, and it's also got a nice, especially if you're doing high percentages, it actually gives a slight pinkish kind of color to the clear wheat. And you can use sorghum either as malted or you can use it unmalted. If you do unmalted, then generally the guys use a little bit more enzymes, enzymes that you buy and you actually add in liquid enzymes.
Okay.
Yeah. So it actually adds a very different flavor to the beer. All that malty flavors that we normally used to in beers kind of disappear out of the brew. And that my other brew that I've got here, you've got none of that multi backbones and things. So you've got this earthy graininess that's very dry and very fast finish on it, and it's actually quite drinkable. And it's still a clear beer, so it looks like any lager. It's just what I call my lockdown lager.
And it's far more African, right?
Yeah.
Sorry?
It's far more African.
Yeah. No, I mean, cassava is grown in all the subtropical areas from Mozambique upwards, up to Tanzania, as far as Nigeria, all of those areas. So there's a lot of it, and in the sorghum as well. It's quite a hardy plant. So, and that is obviously South Africa as well as up into Africa. And then, maize is basically a staple food. So, yeah.
Kieran says cassava is grown in KZN and Limpopo as well.
Probably in the more tropical areas. I've actually got a plant that I grow here as a bonsai. So it doesn't do well in winter. It doesn't like the
high fire condition. Yeah, it's a bit.
Probably, maybe if this guy's growing it in, it's probably northern Natal where it's a bit warmer, and then Limpopo probably closer to the area. And you probably
they don't really have a winter, hey?
No, not really. So
yeah, makes sense. No, I think it worked really well with the cryo hops as well, because you also get like that cleanness of hop flavor with like it's completely different to a beer, but still a beer. Like it's I don't know how to describe it. I think people just need to buy it and try it.
I mean the hops in here is obviously it is Southern Passion was used on the hot side, so I continue the trend of using African and South African ingredients. But then I think the cryo hop, the Sabro, gives a fantastic little kind of fruity character, which has seemed to have kind of died away now as it's aging. Fresh pineapple and tropical fruit
coconut
has kind of disappeared a little bit with it.
Okay, very cool. Cam, you just got a new beer there. What have you got?
So this is one of the great things about low ABV beers. I can keep going back. So this is my...
I like me slowly sipping.
I don't know if you can see the sun.
I can keep going back to high ABV.
It's very hot sitting here in the sun, so I'm down again. So this is my winter session beer. So it's the milk stout that I took to Summerfest. So about 3.5% ABV, vanilla, and then loads of like chocolate and coffee flavors, but all from malt. So no other funny additives.
But you added vanilla, you say?
I did add vanilla, yeah.
Okay.
So I steeped a couple of vanilla pods in a little bit of vodka. Well, actually, not vodka, some homemade moonshine, and hoid that in the keg.
You've been playing around with low ABV beers for quite some time now, hey? And obviously, as part of your time with the SouthYeasters, you've done a couple of competitions with low ABV beers as well.
Absolutely. So the whole reason I got into home brewing was to try and get the sort of beers here that I couldn't get in South Africa that I wanted. So I like the session strength beers. So sort of 3 to 3.5%. You can just sit and drink and drink and drink, and not too gassy and just lots of flavor and something different. So that's why I got into it. And so I've done those sort of beers most of the time. I've got a 16% Russian Imperial Stout in the fridge that I've brewed as well. I've done the other end of the scale. But this is why I homebrew, is to make this stuff. So this one came first in Wolfgang Cup at Summerfest. So I was quite happy with that.
Don't you think that's why most people start homebrewing though? I mean, that's why we've seen a resurgence now, because you can't get beer at all. But like in South Africa, you saw a lot of people getting into homebrewing when before the craft beer boom hit, and when the only beer was really Windhoek or Castle, and people wanting to make make something different. So if you can't get a beer to your taste, then you end up having to find a way to make it, I guess.
Exactly.
But also,
So how would you
going back to Cam's point? I think, I don't know about you guys, but I also went through a phase of you brew kind of the simple beers, the pale ales, the amber ales, and then you want to push yourself, so you add all the crazy ingredients and pushing the ABV and the weird boils and the decoction, and then you kind of go back to just what you enjoy drinking lots of, and that's maybe easier to brew. And that's definitely where I'm going to go after this lockdown again. It's just quick, easy brew day. Maybe
I got a 3-tap keezer, and I'll always have a light beer and a darker beer, not necessarily a stout, like it could be an amber beer or something like that, but I'll always have 2 of the taps have 2 session strength beers, then my 3rd tap's for the Weird and Wonderful, and hopefully I'll get through this quick enough that I can bring out my Weird and Wonderful before the end of this talk.
Just down it. Sorry, that was the English in me coming out there. So how would you recommend from a homebrew club president point of view, people start to get into homebrewing, for the guys that are just discovering homebrewing now, that maybe haven't thought about it before and now see a need? What would be your best advice to get started, Cam?
So my best advice is get in contact with your local homebrew club. Everyone's situation is different. What they want to achieve is different. There are so many ways to go about it. Finding the one that's right for you is important. And the guys at the homebrew clubs are always so helpful. They'll absolutely help you get started. And it's simple. Just do it. Actually, today, I haven't looked at it yet, and I'm not a on TV person normally, but I actually recorded a 5-litre stovetop brew day, keeping it as absolutely simple as I could, using pots and pans that you've got in the kitchen. I actually did it without any specialist equipment at all. So I don't have a gravity reading. I just tasted it, and yes, it tastes sweet, so I must have had conversion of the sugar. Exactly how much, I'm not sure. But I just want to put out there how simple and easy it is. So hopefully we'll get those videos up in the next couple of days. Perfect.
And I see like most of the supply shops are opening up again. Bev Plus is open. I think Beer Guevara, Beer Lab in Cape Town are open. Up in Joburg, Danie, who's open up there? Do you know?
As far as I know, Brewmart's open, and NFP, National Food Products, Georgian.
Yep.
I'm not sure about Brewcraft yet.
Okay.
I actually think the one in Centurion is open. I heard they bought some stuff.
So there is like
the distilling side. So I'm not sure they sold that.
All 5 or 6 of those guys, I think it's Brewcraft you're thinking of. I think all 6 of them are shipping nationally as well. So as well as being so anywhere in the country, you've got the option now. Through those. They've
all got permits under agricultural or whatever, however it falls. So which is great. So hopefully we don't have to try and make do. People can buy at least some equipment like a hydrometer, maybe, and a thermometer.
I did chat to George, and he said they are running off their feet trying to fill orders. So he did say it is going slow out the gate because they're essentially just packing orders all day, the whole day.
Yeah, that's good news.
Yeah, it's great news.
But also about homebrew clubs is you can avoid buying lots of useless stuff that you don't need, like Cam says, pots on a stovetop will do you perfectly well. And someone who just started homebrewing actually asked me, do I need bottling sugar? And I said, no, you just use normal sugar, boil it for a bit, pop it in, and you're good to go. So there's a lot of stuff that you seem to need, and then you don't actually need it. And obviously there's a big markup on that stuff. So you can avoid a lot of unnecessary costs and learn from others' mistakes, which is always a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
On the brew club meetings, I mean, I joined the Warthogs here in Johannesburg. I enjoyed the league tasting afterwards because you can taste other brewers' stuff and the things that they are very good at. And you can actually ask them questions. How did you do this? How did you do that? And I've picked up many tips on just addition times or doing something very specific that I never thought about. And then actually applying it in my own brewing. So I really, really enjoy the league tasting side of it, and actually asking the brewer what he's done. When I tasted, and then actually ask him if I can actually put the two together.
And I think that's a great thing about brewing for me, is that it's 4 ingredients. If you just take a basic beer, malt, hops, yeast, and water, but there's endless things you can do with that. So you'll be experimenting for the rest of your life to try and figure out what does what, and if you add the hops 2 minutes later, how do they interact? And so that's what makes it really interesting for me. It's hard work, but it's rewarding. Unless your beer has to be poured down the drain, like my last barrel.
Did you fall off your chair with all those low?
In the voice there.
Yeah. I'm still mourning.
Cam, did you just fall off your chair there with all those low ABV beers?
Yeah, that's it. Fortunately, it wasn't me. It was my tablet fell off the table. But
It's still surviving.
It is, yeah. It actually just fell backwards. They've got like quite an angle to get me rather than the roof, and bumped the table and went.
So what do people feel is the appetite for trying to get a national homebrew festival once all this is over?
Like a Clarence for homebrew.
That's from, well, I think we tried to do it. We were going to do it with Fools and Fans this year. We're on the Friday. So I guess that's why Trevor's asking.
Name and shame, not really shame.
Yes, we will be there when you redo Fools and Fans. Promise.
Yeah, we will.
Lift your game, Trevor. Lift your game.
Here's a question for you, Cam.
Trevor.
Why did you add the vanilla to the keg and not the fermenter?
So basically, I didn't want to lose any of those flavors and aromas to blow off and transfer. So I wanted to get it into the beer as close to packaging time as possible. So if you put it in the fermenter, as that CO2 is bubbling off as fermentation's going along, you're going to lose some of those vanilla aromas and flavors and stuff out through the airlock along with everything else.
Did you say you steeped it first? Yeah.
Yeah, I steeped it in basically vodka, just to it sterilizes it and it pulls the flavors out. And so I didn't add the vanilla beans themselves. I added that vanilla vodka that had been made into the.
Okay, you just filtered the beans out.
Yeah, exactly.
Brewcraft is still closed apparently, but Brew Keg and Tap are open in Josie as well, as our Kettle Trial. They do a lot of the distilling stuff as well, don't they?
Yeah, distilling.
Yeah, but I suppose they have some ingredients for beer as well, right? They must do. There's a crossover.
Yeah, well, if you're making a whiskey, then you need barley.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
But I've seen a lot of dodgy distilling recipes, so hopefully they're putting some education out there as well. There's some scary stuff.
Have you seen those questions? That's why I kind of wanted to do this really, because there's a lot of debate about getting into homebrewing, and I kind of wanted to sort of get a bit of a platform. But you've seen the questions about I've been fermenting my potatoes. Now how do I get vodka? How does the vodka work? Do you have a still? No.
Yeah, it's, I don't know.
Got a pretty frothed bit of water then.
Yeah. You can't even make soup with that anymore. But I mean, we're laughing, but it is scary, and hopefully it doesn't lead to any crackdowns or new regulations. That's the worry on my side. Yeah.
Because I think as far as beer goes, homebrewing is very safe. I mean, you're pretty much going to make a product that's you can't even have a sip of before it could not be drinkable, right?
I don't know what you'd have to do to actually make it dangerous.
Yeah, no pathogens can stay in beer. All right.
Yeah.
pH that it's at, it's below 4.4. You've got the alcohol that's there. You've got the hops that's there. You've got the CO2, and you've got minimal nutrients left after yeast is done with it. So no pathogens can survive in it. I've seen articles where they've basically dosed live strains of different pathogens in beer, and they basically all die out within 24 hours. They don't survive. The count's going down. So even if you go beer with pathogens, it can't survive in it.
Because brewers' yeast is so strong, or
it's the alcohol environment that it's in, be it from 3.5. The pH is very important. So below 4.4, most pathogens battle to actually survive in it, and then there's also the CO2 environment. So you make it anaerobic. That's in there, and then there's very little nutrients left once the yeast has fermented it all out. So it's really, it's not like these, what do you call it, this malt drinks and those things. Those things have to be pasteurized because that's a broth for something to grow in.
I guess,
so I guess there's a reason. It's very, very safe.
I guess there's a reason they used to make beer in order to make water drinkable, right? I mean, like you had undrinkable water that would make you very sick. So they boiled it and they turned it into beer, and you have a product that's safe for consumption.
Yeah. So I think Danie's absolutely right about the pathogen level of safety. So pH, alcohol, etc. Nothing lives in that sort of environment really, or nothing that's going to hurt you. Sorry, I should say.
Yeah.
But the problem I think we're seeing with a lot of the things that people are doing isn't necessarily infections and pathogens. It's about bad ingredients or bad substances that are added to the alcohol or the homebrew. So, and I think we just need to be very clear that that is not homebrew. Brewing is this specific process, and it's safe where it comes out. So when people start putting all sorts of shit in there to try and up the alcohol content or mix, I mean, we've seen these stupid video clips of people using sparletta and methylated spirits, or people who don't know what they're doing when they're trying to distill, and they end up leaving a whole bunch of methanol in there that's very bad for you.
I guess also with drink and then wake up when lockdown ends.
or not wake up. Yeah. I guess also with those sugar wash, like I did a video for the hard seltzer, but with like specific quantities of ingredients. But I mean, if you add more, you could very easily add too much sugar and make a quite a high percentage product if you're not measuring it properly. Whereas when you're steeping grains, it's very hard to it's much harder to make a high alcohol beer, right? I mean, hey Matt, I mean you made lots of high ABV beers. It's tricky, right?
It's hard work, yeah. You don't do it by accident, that's for sure.
Oh, lovely, Danie.
But just on that note about adding too much sugar. Sorry, probably most dangerous for new brewers is bottle bombs. So I would definitely suggest people who are new to brewing start in a plastic bottle so you can control the carbonation. Because once you add too much to glass bottles, I've had friends who are quite experienced and they've had glass flying past their face. So it's I
never used, well, I used for a very brief period the glass carboys, the big 30-liter ones, and I broke 2 of those and that was it. I was back to plastic, and people like scorn you for using plastic. But I mean, if it's relatively new, not damaged, and you replace it when you scratch them, then it's quite hard to, and you clean it properly. It's quite hard to have a problem with plastic.
Mike, I think where Matt was talking was more in packaging, not in fermentation.
No, sure. No, sorry. Yeah.
But for me, brewing is like running. When you're first starting out, don't buy expensive, fancy equipment. Just learn the basics. You don't need fancy shoes or anything when you're running. So just start with the plastic stuff. Start with the basic pot, and then if you really get into it, because you're not sure if you're going to like it. It's hard work. It's a lot of cleaning. You're basically a janitor for the day. So don't buy all the fancy stuff to show your friends. Rather just see if you like it. Even start with a kit. Start extract brewing, and then see if you want to move to all grain, and go from there. Because
even an all grain kit. A lot of the brew shops sell all grain kits with methodical steps to follow the recipe, and I know Steph's been working on those with since he started at Bev Plus. They've got some really cool recipe kits that he's developed now. But I mean, all the homebrew shops that I've seen have recipe like you don't need to make up your own recipe. You can easily just follow the steps and get a pretty decent beer at the end of it.
Yeah, for sure.
If you clean everything along the way.
Sanitation number 1.
So I wanted to just show you. This is my sorghum, cassava, and milli meal lager.
Amazing.
Wow.
That is so clear.
I see you through that. Yeah.
And a lot of people think that when you brew a sorghum, it's going to look like umkomboti, but it's not. You use it properly and correctly. It's just a starch source. else. So, yeah.
Did you do any filtering or fining on that one?
The only thing that I did do was I did Irish moss in the kettle. So that's the only thing.
So how long has it had to settle? Or is it kegged?
It's now basically 2 weeks old. So 2 weeks in the bottle.
No way. That's
Okay,
amazing.
I've never done something that clear that quickly.
So,
Nice and
so
cool.
what I, yeah.
No, go.
So basically, I do take the fermenter after a week of fermentation, and then I do put it in the fridge for 2 or 3 days. So it's actually chilled down.
Okay, so you've cold crashed it.
Yeah, so I do cold crash it and then put it into the bottle.
Yeah, makes sense.
Into a keg, carb it in there, and then I package it with one of these
Beer guns.
that Andre sells. Yeah, those.
The Bickmans.
Yeah, no, not the gunner. You put the bottle in, and it actually basically blows CO2 in under pressure, and you fill under pressure.
Counter pressure filler.
Yeah, the counter pressure type system that I've just connected to my old cool box system to go through a chill plate and then bottle it into that.
I'm still not on kegging. Every time I have to bottle is a little bit, I cry a little bit. When I poured my pale ale, I was actually quite happy because I didn't have to bottle.
I hate
packaging.
No.
I bottle for competitions and that's it.
Yeah,
and then
from a keg, from a beer gun, from a keg.
Yeah.
I'm a sucker for hard work. What can I say?
I don't even like that.
It's a cheapskate. I don't know.
Well, kegs are cheap. Kegs are cheaper in the long run, surely.
I got to say,
probably
in the long run.
Yeah, that cash flow though.
But then with your beers that you make, you kind of you need to put them in bottles and just put them in the back of a cupboard and leave them for a year or two. Hey?
Yeah, so the last few beers I've made, the one was a whiskey salted caramel. It's usually a wee heavy, but came out a bit low ABV because I was rusty. So I haven't used the grain farther in a while, so my efficiency was low. So I call it now whiskey salted caramel amber ale. I use a 12-year-old single malt that I add in there with some salted caramel that I make myself. So that's made to
How do you
age.
make the salted caramel?
Sugar and a little bit of water on the stove, and then you just add the whiskey to it and the salt.
Salt, surely. Yeah.
Carefully, because that stuff is hard.
Yeah.
No salt. It's magic. So you add a bit of salt. And I don't have measurements. It's mostly gut feel and taste. So that's made to age. Made it for fools and fans, but it still needs another month or so because the salt, it preserves it, but it hides those malt flavors.
Luckily, we got some postponed then, eh?
So lucky. I am going to keep some. And
Mark
then,
is saying that. Oh, sorry, go on, Matt.
Okay.
No, go.
So I recently had my firstborn child 10 months ago. So I brewed a beer for his birthday, which is an English barley wine. So that's also made to age. I want to have one every year until he's 18. So I had one 2 days ago, and that turned out really well. So that's also made to age. And then all the imperial stouts and things, I like to taste them. So this one I'm drinking now, I don't know if you can see the date, but I bottled it on the 29th of May, 2017.
Sure.
It's 16.5%. So what happened is we brewed an imperial stout and a barley wine on the same day. The barley wine came out at 12%, and then the imperial stout came out at 14%. And then we had some wort left over from the imperial stout brew. So we took a packet of Weiss yeast and chucked it into 5 liters of the imperial stout wort, which we had boiled for 8 hours. And it went from an OG of 1155 to 1030. So it just tore through that like nobody's business.
Is it WBO6 or?
I think so, yeah. And then it carbonated as well, which I was amazed by. And some of the 14% didn't carbonate, but this did. So it landed at about 16.5%, and it's tasting phenomenal.
So much for the supposed alcohol tolerance of WBO6. That's out the door.
Yeah, I don't know if it was the low volume, the 5 liters that did it, but I mean, I tested the gravity a few times and same result every time. So
I've done a little bit of experiment on my kitchen counter recently. I was just looking for a whole nother reason. I was looking for high ABV yeasts, and I saw that Belle Saison is quoted as having quite a high tolerance. I literally did it with just sugar and Nutravin, in water. I've had like a 1.5 litre little fermentation going on my counter. It's over 19% now and it's still eating.
Sure. Because most use champagne yeast, right? If they want to make a big ABV something or other.
Yeah.
Cider or
Yeah, there's a lot of. So I just want to catch up with these questions really quickly. Mark says that most of the homebrew shops this week are going literally nuts. Some have had to shut down their website. Yeah, I can imagine it must be a nightmare to be working, but also nice, because
Yeah.
the
They've haven't had business for a while.
Yeah,
Exactly.
hopefully they're on
Yeah.
commission.
Yeah.
What does Trevor say? He wants me to mention his name in the episode. I won't mention Trevor's name at all.
No.
What else is happening here? A lot of chat, but I just want to see if there's any questions. David's got a mug of tea, sat in the sun watching it. David, where's your Guinness? David brewed a Guinness the other day.
Is that like a mug of tea stout or what's the?
Maybe, yeah. They did an Earl Grey tea beer in the UK. Oh, was that New Zealand? Those guys, anyway.
Yeasty Boys, Earl Grey IPA.
Yeasty Boys, yeah.
One of my favorite beers. Yeah, phenomenal.
Yeah.
What does that taste like?
Beer Lab closed.
It's like smoky and floral. It's if you get it right, it's amazing. The Yeasty Boys one is a good example.
Yeah, I quite liked it.
Think of the name. It's like Ganamata or something.
Yeah.
Great beer.
I think there's a recipe for it. I think I've got a recipe for it in one of those homebrew books. I'll have a look.
It is on their website as well.
Is it?
Yeah.
Beer Lab closed for the weekend to catch up on orders, but we'll be back online on Monday again. Trevor's asking, would somebody in Cape Town deliver him a Grainfather? Bev Plus closed to catch up. Wow, it sounds crazy, hey? Distilling is way more specialized and definitely much more dangerous than brewing, especially with new distillers. Yeah, no, for sure.
Absolutely.
Especially with new distillers not wanting to throw out any of the methanol. Yeah, what's the bit called above the heads? The first 200 mils that have all the methanol in. But yeah.
It's the heads, the hearts and bells.
Yeah, I don't know what's above the heads.
Yeah. And then somebody's corrected me saying with sugar though, the yeast would die off before reaching dangerous levels, even when using EC 1118. So yeah, that's true. Yeah, it would probably die. Most Saccharomyces
depends on your definition. That's what I'm saying. I've got Belle Saison is at 19% and still going. So if you're expecting a 5% beer,
yeah.
So
I think that's what I meant. I think that's what I meant. Like you could be trying to make a sugar wash pineapple beer, and you think it's 5%, and you drink 5 pints of it, and it's 15%. You could.
But trust me, you'll be able to taste the difference between 15 and 5%.
Yeah.
You'll be tasting the floor. That's why.
Yeah, the other flavors and stuff that is there will also tell you that this is high alcohol. The higher alcohol, for sure, right?
But I wonder, Cameron, on your example, the 19%, if you get some destabilization, so maybe the flavors start changing, or you get weird esters or something that start creeping in there. So maybe they give a.
So what's really strange is initially it smells like, quite hectic. I mean, it's literally just sugar. There's nothing else in there. And actually, when I checked it today, so it's 6 weeks today that it's been bubbling along. Like it's getting down. I mean, I've only done 3 gravity points in the last week, but it's still moving. I still see the odd bubble come out the airlock. It actually smells quite palatable. I mean, I had no intention of drinking any of it. It was going to go down the drain, but it's actually smelling a lot better. It's like it started aging in the fermenter.
Wow. I'll be interested to see how it tastes. If you
mentioned about
from the emergency room.
You mentioned about the malt extract kits, Matt. Somebody's asking, Kieran's asking what the kits like in South Africa. Are they all Coopers? I never used the malt extract kits.
I haven't either. I assume he's talking about the cans that you can buy.
Yeah.
A little bit older, obviously they come.
I've seen at least 3 different brands of cans. I've seen the Cooper's cans, the Muntons cans, and the Mangrove Jacks sachets.
The sachet,
yeah.
And NFP makes a local version as well, where they use the local malt extracts. I think we've lost Matt. Or he's frozen.
Oh, he's frozen. Okay.
I think it goes very well.
He might come back. Yeah. I don't know. I have a funny approach with things. I just started doing sourdough recently, and rather than like, there was a recipe on YouTube for the basic sourdough recipe or the advanced one. So I thought, no, I'm going to do the advanced one first, and screw that up a few times. But like, rather than learn the basic, and I did the same with brewing. I didn't want to go into the whole extract thing. I just wanted to do all grain from the start. So and cock up a whole load of beers, and then get there eventually. I'll see if Matt's gonna rejoin here. Yeah, what's happening in the chat? 3 of my YouTube.
While you're looking at that, so this is my next beer. This is the one I wanted to bring out. So my little labour of love. This is my attempt at a Rodenbach clone. It's a Flanders red beer, been aged in oak barrels in my brew room for 12 months before I kegged it. So
Lovely.
made two different barrels with slightly different mixed culture fermentation. So I mean, both lacto and Brett, but different strains. And yeah, ended up blending the two. I think I went to 2/3 from one barrel and 1/3 from the other. So 12 litres of one, 8 and 6 litres of another into a keg. And that I did a bunch of little samplings. Like I had all of one, all of the other, and different ratios in between, and taste them. So which one was the best pour it in, and then a whole bunch more water back into the 2 barrels to top them up and leave it for another 12 months.
Damn, it makes me wish that we were all sitting around the same table and sharing tasters there.
So I got a homebrew beer here that David brought over from the UK last year for Fools and Fans. I think it's a Belgium triple, David, but you can correct me. And he bought 2 bottles, and we had one then, which he said was a bit young, and we should keep it. And my plan was to keep it for when he was over at Fools and Fans. But I figured, seeing we're doing homebrew, it's one of the homebrew beers I could find, so I'm going to crack it open. And the carbonation's still there nicely, but not exploding. Matt's run out of electricity, by the way. That's where Matt is. Not load shedding, just.
I thought his job was. Didn't he say at the start his job is stock control?
He's all right with stock control of beer, but look how beautiful that's looking. You can see that in the. It's too much.
That's very nice.
Nice,
clear.
lovely.
Is this the same David that we met at Fools and Fans last year?
From Yorkshire, yeah. He's watching now. So I see what he says in the chat. 4 shots. The first 200 milliliters is cool. There you go. In distilling. My distilling knowledge is poor, but thanks, Daniel.
Nice.
They've. How important is crop year when selecting hops for your next brew? There you go, Danie. That's a good question for you.
Well, I think it's all environmentally dependent. That's why all the big brewers send out their top brewers out to go and actually test the same hop variety from different areas, and they choose, the batches that they want. So yeah, a cascade from one area is not the same as a cascade from another area. So
yes.
If you droughts that season, the cascade will be different in a previous season where you maybe had a wet season. So definitely every season is different. And even here in South Africa, I've seen it around, especially Southern Passion, African Queen, and even Southern Promise. I've seen that before, where the season has an impact on the hop. And
yeah.
So unfortunately for South Africa, I don't think we get the best of the aroma varieties in South Africa, unless somebody goes and bats for us. It's selects a good batch for us. Otherwise, we kind of get what's left over from what has been selected.
Who gets the best? Locally, SAB or export?
No. Locally, I don't think SAB really selects around the best. ABMF might do that around Southern Passion. I'm not sure, but I do know that American hop varieties and that they all get together and basically do the hop rubbings, and then they choose which batches from which farms and that they want specifically for their farm. for their business. And I also look at the analysis and look at the different components and that and what levels they are at.
Cool. Welcome back, Matt.
Thank you. I ran out of electricity. That's, I don't know what else to say. I spent all my money on other things. Can't afford electricity.
One of the comments in here was that maybe the fresher hops are the better. The younger hops you can get would be the best.
Definitely, if you have, because always remember, you'll be 1 year basically behind, because hops is not grown throughout all, the year. There's a harvest season. Obviously, with with different supplies and that, you have different harvests, but you only get hops one time per year from whichever country you get it from. So
yeah.
In southern hemisphere, you'll be in the same year. So hops from South Africa and Australia, they're harvested around February time, roughly. Yeah. So
and New Zealand, Cam. Let's get the best part of the Australasian hops.
Yep. So southern hemisphere hops, you'll be in the same year. Northern hemisphere, you'll be last year's crop. So because they harvest August, September time or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what they will do is they won't allow the new season's hop to go out until the old season has been used up. So that's why there's always this little lag. If you had a poor season where the hop tonnage went down, then obviously you'll get the new season a lot quicker than where you had a bumper season and you have lots of that left.
Yeah. Question about cider. Has anyone been making cider during lockdown?
Nah.
Lots of
not from outside. I think one thing to say, cider can also be brewed very safely at home. But cider is actually, and I just did it myself then. Cider isn't brewing. So brewing is a very specific process. Cider is a fermentation, similar as wine and stuff. So you go through a very different process. So your considerations in terms of sanitation and risks and things are different in making a cider or a wine or a mead than they are to making beer.
The wine guy's sanitation is completely different to the brewing guy's sanitation.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, with the cider, you're typically not boiling, so you've got other concerns about what's coming into the cider from at the start, because you're not boiling it and killing anything that's there naturally. So it's not brewing. It's safe as well. There's ways to do it, but the processes and the considerations are different. So don't confuse cider with brewing.
That's why they use a lot of sulfites in the wine industry, right? That's the sanitation.
Yeah, but just for the apple juice, you must make sure to use the right stuff. So not too much preservatives and things like that. So I don't do a lot of cider making, but I know that's pretty important.
Yeah, I haven't made cider, even though I'm from a cider part of the UK. Not. I'd love to make one.
Relatively easy to do safely, but it's just don't bucket it with brewing.
Yeah. Fermenting. It's fermenting. It's that part of making beer. The last part.
The important part, by the way.
The fermentation. Sure. Otherwise, you just got a lot of sugary water.
But I think it's much easier to make to the points Danie was making earlier. It's much easier to make a dangerous or infected cider than it is to make an infected beer.
Yeah. If you follow good practices, I think so.
Yeah. Have any of you guys done much distilling? Cam, you mentioned about some moonshine there.
Yeah, so I've got a grain father and I've got a T500 column still to go on top of that. So I've used it just for using up. I had a couple of bad batches of beer. I haven't had many, but I've had a few. And we also bought some horrible frot wine, or tasted nice on the farm, but didn't taste nice a little while later. So rather than throw it down the sink, just distilled it, got a bunch of ethanol out of it. I mean, I get about 93% alcohol out of the column still. So I then sort of dilute it down and I use it for sanitation, for cleaning, or in the airlocks on my fermenters, rather than putting just water there in case it gets sucked back in by accident.
Yeah.
I did try taking it. I did double filtering through 2 runs through a carbon filter and tried drinking it, and it's drinkable, but it doesn't do it for me.
Hops don't distill well, hey?
Hop shots, yeah, no.
I've never had. There was a couple gin companies, I won't name names, in Cape Town making gin with bad beer, and you can still get those traces of the hops, and even through a proper big still.
But there's 2 types of stills. So there's the pot stills and the column stills or the reflux stills.
Yeah.
So if you're going through a pot still, definitely you're going to get a lot of carry through of flavour and stuff, and you deliberately do that with whiskies and other things as well to want that flavour to come through. But if you're using a column still and you're getting 93, 94, 95% pure ethanol out, there's not much else other than water that's making up that other 4%.
Yeah. Trevor's saying that David's saying that I'm doing my best not to spit out his beer. I'm plowing through this. This is amazing. I can't remember what percentage it was, but it's a Belgian triple, so I'm assuming it's not.
Nice.
It's not too weak, but it's fantastic, David. It's the extra 14 months or whatever it's been since you gave it to me has aged it really well. About the cider
from the
again.
last Fools and Fans.
Yeah. When he was over last year, you missed it. You were paying your ESCOM bill.
Finding my way through the dark.
Shouldn't have to pay those guys, eh?
Yeah,
Getting products for cider is much easier at this time. We're enjoying our pear, apple, ginger ciders. Yeah, no. Well, it definitely was during lockdown. I think now, when the homebrewing shops go back to a little bit of normality, then getting homebrew supplies is going to be just as easy, and it must be cheaper to make beer than cider. Hey? I mean, apples are not that cheap from what I've seen.
I don't know.
No idea.
No.
It depends on your source, I think. Beer, I mean, it depends how many hops you add, that sort of thing. That can get quite expensive. And if you can find a straight to farm kind of source for apple juice, then you could probably do it on the cheap.
Yeah, sure.
I
mean, hops are not cheap, I guess. So.
Add gas and electricity and a bunch of other things that you need for cider.
Yeah, true. Everybody who made pineapple beer made cider. We had a funny discussion about it. Well, no, it's not true. Cider must be apples.
Okay, fair enough.
They made pineapple wine because wine is any fruit.
Yeah, but isn't it more pineapple flavored sugar wash?
Exactly. So if you're adding sugar to it, then I think it's one of those hard seltzers, and whatever flavor you add into it is then becomes something hard seltzer, right?
Yeah. But now what do we call ginger beer?
It's not beer.
It's ginger beer because that's now very traditional to say ginger beer, but that's not beer.
But some companies that Goggo's one made it with malt, eh?
So I made ginger beer. It depends how you made it. I made ginger beer for my wife loves it, so I made it. I don't know, about 3-4 months back. 100% malt bill, and half a kilo of ginger root in the kettle.
Any hops?
No hops.
So is it beer? That's got to be the question.
It's Groot. It's ginger Groot.
Now we're just being pedantic there.
I'm going to keep calling my ginger beer. I don't care.
And the ginger ales or whatever, the non-alcoholic, the sugary stuff. I mean, that's probably not even got any ginger in it, but I mean, that's definitely not beer.
Well, ale is still beer, right?
No, but the Schweppes ginger.
Yeah. It's all flavoring. But I have a wild ferment ginger beer that I make. I don't know what I would call it. Not ginger wine. That feels weird because it's non-alcoholic. So
yeah.
But that's what they called in the UK. Everyone was making wines. It was all fruited wines, and they were plum wines and all that. Any fruit.
Garlic wine. I've heard of garlic wine.
Yeah, there was loads of it. Yeah.
Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. I think that's also a good rule for homebrew.
My neighbor's kid tried pineapple beer and asked me for some yeast. All I had was a rum yeast, so we got a very dry ABV. Yeah, but I mean, pineapple beer, with that sugar, it's going to be dry anyway, right? Even the one I did with the it's going to dry out. Even the one with Baker's.
I mean, the yeast doesn't care what you give it to ferment; it will ferment it. You know, it's just the base flavors that you want that's left over. That's it. Yeast doesn't care what you give it. So
and pineapple is very simple sugars. It's not like it's leaving a lot of a lot of complex sugars behind that it can't ferment. It's just chowing through all of that stuff. So
so there's very little body left, very little sugars, so it will be quite dry.
Yeah, for sure. This beer from David was brewed on the 28th of September 2018 and was 7.91%. Nice and specific.
Sure. Okay.
I thought it had a bit of a kick. I could not as much as yours, Matt, but
you thought it was 8%, but yeah, it's close.
Yeah, I know. I missed that 0.09. So how did you, Danie, tell us about how you got started into brewing then, because it's a bit of a different story from the home brewing side.
Geez, I've been in the brewing side about 22 years now. And essentially I got into it as a student because freaking hell, working for a beer company, that must be brilliant. It just kind of became my niche, and I just got more and more in love with it as it went on. So I started as a trainee brewer, down in President and Durban, and worked all over South Africa at the different breweries, new product development, Pretoria, Polokwane, Shamdor, and then I worked into Africa as well, brewing there, looking about 25 breweries going out that way as well. So so it was a great experience.
Good company to work for back in the day as well, eh? I understand.
Yeah, no, fantastic. There was a real passion for beer. And what drove them. So
and you left before AB InBev came over, eh?
Yeah. No, I mean, I was involved with the craft beer scene probably 10 years, now be probably years ago, and SAB totally supported me. Anything that I wanted to do with the craft beer scene. I'm not quite sure if AB InBev does that now. So, but yeah.
But SAB definitely did in the early days. Yeah.
I think
I remember organizing raw materials, because those days it was very difficult to get crystal malts and those kind of things. And we had some, and then oats would come there, we'd dish up like half a bucket, in a plastic packet and those kind of things, helping guys out with those kind of things. So
I think what people forget is that it's not big beer versus craft beer. It's actually beer versus other drinks, and then also just alcohol versus non-alcoholic, and it's just a share of the pie. So you can't start going down that road of us versus them. It's just dangerous, and everybody loses. So the more you help each other out, the more everybody wins.
I think that depends on the big guys though, because how they have such a say that how they dictate the market makes that. If they're the ones doing the corporate bullying act to the small guys, then it is a case of them versus us. But if they're, in SAB's case back in the day when the Danie was talking about, if they're supporting everyone, then it's definitely not that case. Then you can't have an issue with them at all.
The thing is, it's so difficult to fight them, Mike. So you actually have to approach them and say, how do we work together? Can we work something out, rather than just try and.
Well, you're not going to win.
It's the bully, I guess. So
it is David and Goliath. That's the problem, eh? So you're not
So how do we collaborate rather than how do one of us win?
Kieran is saying that Prospecton was 20 meters from his house. Durban boy, but he's in the UK now. How long were you in Prospecton for?
Geez, almost 2.5 years, huh?
Yeah.
I did all my training at Prospecton.
I've been.
I remember some of the biggest piss-ups I've ever had in my life. A brewery. So
that's near the Bluff, isn't it? That's all the boys from the Bluff there.
Listen, no, I lived on the Bluff. I used to drive. It was at the old airport. It was just across from the old airport. So,
yeah.
At least we know you can organize a piss up at a brewery, so that's a relief.
I've done a few of those, but we've also failed a few times. But yeah, we've managed to do that. So.
This is actually 8.5%. David's changed his mind now. After I've almost finished it, it's growing. What are your guys' thoughts on beer, cider, wine hybrids? Well, we did a beer wine hybrid with the Wine Thief. It was going to be released also at Falls and Vans with Ewan from the Wine Thief and Olaf from Franschhoek Brewing with some beautiful Viognier grapes that we threw into like a Berliner Weisse, but we were going to call it a Cape Weisse. Well, it's still there. It's still aging. It's got lactic acid. It's got lactobacillus in it, and obviously the Viognier grapes. So I'm sure it'll mellow and age quite nicely. But I love that sort of stuff. Mixing of flavors. I don't know about you guys, but
if I remember correctly, it's Stephen King. His Dark Tower series has a cider beer hybrid, and there's a lot of experimentation there to try and get that recipe 100%. I haven't tried
cider.
it.
Yeah, I reckon that would
mix. Yeah.
I mean, you might get some acetaldehyde flavors from it if you.
Probably. Yeah, I don't know.
But what is it? Cider and beer is a snake bite anyway. I mean, it is a cocktail drink in its own. Hey, Cam.
Was that not invented in like the walkabout pubs in the UK? Because I remember snake bite Sundays were terrible.
So when we were kids, we used to make a snake bite out of. You used to get Carlsberg Special Brew, which was like 8% or something, and you used to get White Stripe cider, which was definitely not cider. I don't know what it was, but it was horrible. Which is also about 8 or 10%. You used to make a snake bite with that, and yeah.
Sorry, when you say kids, are you saying like 12 or?
In England, Matt. You know, I don't know what age you can legally start drinking, but
when you stop breastfeeding, you're straight to the booze.
Probably 16, 17, 18. I don't know.
Okay,
somewhere around the unlaw.
In case the authorities are listening, that's your answer. Sure.
No, in case the authorities are listening, it's 18, definitely.
Okay.
Now Cam hasn't paid his electricity bill either.
Sorry.
Oh, no, he's back.
No. I went onto the chat screen. I was sending a message.
Are you going to go to the walkabout pub? Is that what you said?
No, I was saying, do you want me to take my camera for a walkabout?
But I mean, there is a growing movement in terms of those hybrids in the smaller craft breweries. I wouldn't say the bigger craft breweries, but I know Agar's done some, Soul Barrel has done some, Devil's Peak is obviously big with their wine beer hybrid. So there's actually quite a lot of people trying to kind of sample or trial those sorts of things. And for me,
Rory's done some
beer that they've done with that sort of method.
Rory's done some fantastic ones, at Agar Project.
I like anything, you got to try it and see if it works. And some things will and some things won't. So,
and hopefully we don't sell it if it doesn't work.
Yeah,
there is that. Isn't that what festivals are for? Bring along a keg or two and see how it goes down.
Exactly.
Yes.
The popularity vote wins. Do the guys pasteurize fruit before they put it in the beer? Oh, there's a debate.
I do.
A lot of guys blanch the fruit, from what I understand. Or
do what, sorry?
Or something. A lot of guys blanch the fruit.
Okay. So you mean like at a low temperature?
Well, at a hot water or what, and then basically take the fruit out. I mean, as soon as over 65 degrees Celsius, you kind of get most things within like 4 or 5 minutes. You can actually sort that out.
Yeah.
There's
without killing off.
They go up to 71, 72 degrees Celsius.
Yeah.
But generally, blanching helps. Fondness reduces that.
It's Dimians.
Ah.
I had this. So when I saw you last, Danie, up in up at your homebrew meeting, and and Dimian was moving to Paris.
France, yeah.
Yeah, and he was giving away his stash of beer, and I grabbed a couple bottles, and this is one of them. So his Flanders Red. Cam, you mentioned about your Rodenbach Flanders Red clone.
Yeah.
Now, so I thought I would grab this one out as well and join you on the Flanders Reds. But I also have some Rodenbach in my fridge, which I bought from Brendan from the
One of my favorite beers.
Yeah.
Rodenbach.
It's good, eh? And it's very well priced for what it is.
Bang for buck. You can't get many better beers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know,
The 250 ml bottles is just.
Yeah, that's
it's just
trolling a
about
little
the.
bit.
Huh?
You know.
I think it's just about the right amount, don't you? For that, like.
No.
I love sour beers, so
Quarts.
just say I've got this on tap.
Can't get the light to shine on that color. It's like it's definitely red. Oh wow.
Well, you see this beer, yeah?
Yeah.
This is my Gruit. So, but, no hops in it, but it's got wormwood, tulsi basil, lemon balm, and it's sage in it as well. So
that would be a Gruit, yeah.
yeah, Gruit,
Yeah.
yeah. So basically,
And then
herb
apparently,
beer,
a Graf is wort and apple juice, according to Daniel on the chat here.
how do you spell that?
GRAF.
A Graf.
That sounds right. Yeah, that's a Stephen King thing. As far as I know.
I've heard that term before, but I had no idea what it was.
I must
Beer
say,
and apple juice.
I've been meaning to actually try a cider and beer combination to actually try and see how that comes out. So I'm quite keen to try that.
Yeah, it sounds very good. I reckon that could work. Looks nice, Cam.
Cheers. I didn't quite work to show the color.
Any of you guys brewing on any systems other than the Grainfather that you can show? Gregory asks. I can't.
I'm
brewed. Sorry, you go, Cameron.
Okay, so I've got a Grainfather, and I've got my own little Franken machine that I made, like based on a Raspberry Pi and a coffee urn. So I can take a walk if you want.
Yeah, please. Yeah. Danie, you brew on a Grainfather as well, eh? Mostly.
I've actually got two Grainfathers. So I've done 4 brews on a day with that system. But I've also got a stainless steel keg system that I've built myself initially. That allowed me to do up to 40 liters. I actually welded 2 stainless steel kegs together system. And then I've got a little brew in a bag system that I use as well if I go, and brew somewhere strange and, show guys some brewing tricks and tips, especially starting off. I mean, brew in a bag for me is the easiest way anyone can start. You basically buy an urn, you buy, your a gauze, in the old days, praat van die kantgordijn, and you make a bag out of that and you brew with that. That's it.
Yeah, for sure.
That's very good in English. Die kantgordijn. That's very
yeah. Hey, kantgordijn, huh? See.
Cam, you're full screen, I think. Hopefully.
Okay, so this is my little brewery built out of an urn. So I've got a pump underneath, and there's a thermal well there with temperature probe going in. I've got some custom thermal wells there to measure the temperatures on the inlet and outlet ports, maybe you can see. And then up here on the wall, I've got a touchscreen Raspberry Pi controller with a big red button to turn it off if things go pear-shaped. But
except for load shedding, that's
that's a problem, yeah. And then I have chill water coming from my rainwater tank on a solenoid.
Cameron?
Yeah.
But if a startup brewer, he wants to buy a urn at, say, at a plastic shop or wherever, he can essentially use a a grain bag in it. And once you pull the bag out, you can boil in that. And then obviously after that, it needs to cool somehow.
Yeah. So, what
does your cooler look like? What cooling system do you use in your system at the moment?
Okay, so I actually used the Grainfather's chiller with it. Sorry, maybe I should have shown that while I was there. So,
go for another walk. But you must tell us about the very popular Aussie method of
the
chilling.
no-chill brewing. No-chill.
Yeah.
I've never done that. So if you look at
Did you lose your citizenship because of it?
I know. They all do it. They all do it, don't they? Let me just make you full screen again. Sorry, 2 seconds.
All the good one.
There we go.
So it's basically the Grainfather's counterflow chiller. And I've got a couple of Camlock ports here on the front. So
did you get Camlock just because of the name?
Yeah, Cam is short for Cameron.
I did really,
Cameron
yeah.
Lock.
So I can connect either the Grainfather or my other one to it. And that's also wired in, as I say, to the rainwater tanks to run the rainwater.
I think, do you have an example of an immersion chiller there to show maybe an up-and-coming brewer? So if you've boiled something, you can actually use an immersion chiller to cool down the wort that you've boiled in the vessel that you.
Yeah, sure, no worries. Yeah. I don't use it in either of those two setups, but I have one in the garage, a spare one, so I'll come show you.
Because I think that's the easiest way for a new brewer to get into it. If you've bought the urn, you've got a bag, you put the grain in. Once you boil, you take it out, put the immersion chiller in the urn, and then you go from there into your bucket. And then
Yeah. Or if you're brewing on a stove, though, you've frozen, Cam. Oh, you're back.
If you can still use a little urn.
Yeah.
But you can use ice, maybe.
Ice. I was going to say an ice bath. Yeah, water bath.
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh, it's so fancy.
That's a lot of coils, huh? You can use a lot less than that, but that's very efficient.
Did you make that one, Cam? I think your internet connection where your chiller is a bit poor.
Yeah, so Cam's one is very fancy. I'm still on my original boil pot. Sure. From 5
you got
years
a double coil.
Yes, that's serious.
That's fancy. Yeah.
So
did you make that?
I made it myself, yeah. It was an entire roll of copper tubing from aircon place.
Francois says no chill equals cooked corn beer, DMS. They do it in a cube. It's called cube, isn't it? Cubing.
Yeah, they fill it to the top. I'm not a big fan of it, but if you don't have anything,
fill that to the top. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a cube.
It's one of these. Put it in from hot. HD. If it's a proper thick HDP container, it can take up to 120 degrees or something like that. I can't remember the exact number.
Yeah.
Seal it, and it sanitizes itself. Because it's a completely sealed unit, you can leave it for weeks without pitching yeast.
Yes.
A lot of the home brew shops in Australia, you can actually go and buy worts like this, and you just take it home, add yeast and an airlock to make your beer. So instead of buying extract cans or whatever, people who just want to have beer at home that they made themselves, they buy it, all the job done, add the yeast, and package.
Jeez, that sounds like a trick we've missed in this lockdown, huh?
Yeah.
Alcohol.
Yeah. I know, the brewers could be selling worts.
Yeah. Jeez, damn it.
And then you could have done it in a keg.
I mean, come on.
You could do it in a keg with a dispensing tap, with a picnic tap on it.
And in the corner here, we've got a couple of Flanders casts going on.
Oh, nice. It's a bit, your internet connection is not amazing where you are now, so it's a bit clicky, but I'll see if I can. Oh, you've gone. Okay, never mind.
Sorry, Wi-Fi in the garage is a little bit too far. There's too many free concrete.
Go back to civilization, Cam. You're in the outback. Go back to normal life.
So has anybody had any success with grapefruit in beers, more specifically in an IPA? Be interested in quantities of fruit or zest needed.
I assume you mean homebrew. This isn't a comment on Devil's Peak.
No, don't get me commenting on that, Cam. You're gonna get me in trouble. Brewdog have a recipe for their grapefruit beer on their recipe book, don't they?
Yeah, so I've copied their recipe book, and it's very different to what you actually get. I don't know how they calculated their numbers, but it's I had to do a lot of math still when I took one of their recipes to convert it to homebrew.
I gotta say,
I used off the charts. It was crazy.
No, I didn't get that far out. I've done a couple of beers of theirs. I did the Dead Pony Club, and I've done 3 or 4 of their beers, and it's worked pretty well. I haven't had to do too much fiddling.
Yeah.
What sort of quantities are we talking about of zest and juice there?
I haven't done grapefruit ones. Sorry, but I mean just generally the DIY dog stuff. I found
a lime beer, but I can't remember the quantities, to be honest. But I've done a lime and chili beer. But nice. I mean, the best approach to any sort of beer is to take a small amount, like 500 mils or a liter or 250 mils, and add a certain amount. And then when you're happy with the flavor, then you just scale it up to however much you want to bottle. Yeah. And then that's how much you use. That's a good way of making sure you're happy with the flavor and the profile of the beer.
Yeah. I've got a golden rule. Less is more. You can always go, damn it, next time I must put more. But if you have to go, shit, this is undrinkable, you can always go, maybe double this amount should be good. So if you can't drink
vanilla. Vanilla seems to fade very quickly for me. I don't know, Cam, maybe you can chime in here, but vanilla,
I haven't had much luck with vanilla either.
Later, it disappears.
It does, but it's I mean, maybe not a few weeks, but by month 2, like so, as I say, when I do add it, I add it in the keg. So post fermentation. But yeah, it does start fading after a little bit. Not completely though. But I guess it's the same thing when you get NEPAs and stuff. If you don't drink them fresh, you're going to lose.
Yeah, definitely.
You're going to lose some of that excitement. So
I found that with fruit as well. Like if you add, like I think it's always difficult to add too little fruit. Like that Florida Vice I had at the start, I added 3 kgs in 20 liters, and it just wasn't enough. 4 or 5 would have been way better. Which is
Yeah, fruit is very disheartening. You need to add a lot to get any
just
sort
disappears,
of roast fruit.
Doesn't it?
You wonder why you wasted it.
Yeah.
I remember reading somewhere though. It's so if you think of like food and wine pairing or food and beer pairing or anything like that, when you've got 2 competing flavors, one's going to win out. So the thing that I read was that if you're adding fruit to beer, you have to match the beer and the fruit, particularly around the pH or acidity levels. So if you add like a flabby fruit to an acidic beer or an acidic fruit to a flabby beer, you're going to write one of the 2 off. So
that makes sense. Yeah.
So there's I did quite a bit of work with SAB with brutal fruits and all those things. There's very specific. If a specific flavor, it's got a specific acid to sugar ratio that you require. And that's the problem with putting fruit in beer, is that the yeast generally chows away the sugar. And what's left over is the citric acid from the fruit or the malic acid. And that's why the flavor changes quite a bit on that. So it's more around the sugar to acid ratios that actually gives you, and a specific type of acids that actually makes you taste that is orange or that is apple, that's in there. And unfortunately, with beer, generally yeast ferments away the sugar part, and then it changes the whole flavor threshold of flavor profile.
Yeah, and that's what I've heard. I think that makes a lot of sense. So the more acidic fruits work a lot better in beer than the sweeter fruits.
But I think safe to say, if you're new to brewing, stay away from fruit. That, yeah, it can go wrong very easily.
So Brian says,
you want
doesn't a Flanders red need to mature for more than a year? This one was brewed by Damian in July 2017. And we can see on the.
Is that more than a year though, Mike?
I think that's like 3 years almost.
Okay.
And also, Matt,
coronavirus, I'm not sure anymore. I don't know where we are.
And Matt, there's a point for you here that everybody else is on their third beer except for you.
Well, listen, I've got to say, I've seen Damian's a picture of Damian's fermentation room, and there was like 20 fermenters aging at any one time.
Really?
Yeah, it was quite impressive to see. I was quite smacked.
Did he get to move, or did he not make the?
Actually, I'm not sure. I think he was stuck in South Africa. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody in the comments can tell us. But yeah, I do remember it was quite an impressive sight to see all these aging. Yeah. And
his beers are fun. This is amazing.
3 years old. Yeah.
This is better than Rodenbach for me. This is this is next level.
Big words.
Well, yeah, I am a bit drunk.
One thing that Rodenbach has that I've suffered that I haven't been able to replicate, and it looking at your glass, Damian hasn't either. I get head retention sucks on my beer, but Rodenbach keeps that big fluffy head the whole way through.
Yeah, I don't think head retention is a big deal in a sour beer for me, but yeah.
True, but I still want to know how they do it.
Yeah.
True. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot to do with the head retention is around the protein level in your beer, as well as the hops. So the higher you hop, the more alpha acids you have. It actually stabilizes the bubble that you get in your beer. And generally in the sours, I find, there's the fatty acids that get formed that actually breaks down a lot of those foam potential. So you have foam negative and foam positives, and then in the sour beers, I think a lot more foam negatives that generally push the foam down. So it'll be interesting.
In a cask for 12 months, as this has been. I mean, the amount of oils that it's soaked up from the wood. I mean, it's sort of on a hiding to nothing, but they somehow get it right.
Also, remember that if you have yeast for a year, if it's low-level yeast, and if the yeast breaks open, the proteases in the yeast will actually also affect the foam level. So maybe they have a more robust yeast that can actually withstand long periods.
Maybe, yeah.
And other foam positives that they put in.
Okay. Or maybe off the kegs or something. Interesting thought.
Then back to your immersion chiller, Cam. Jono says that Meta Clark supplies copper pipe in already coiled form, which is ordered today. So that's
to make an immersion chiller.
Yeah, to make an immersion chiller. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Yeah. That's brilliant because if you
can you share the link in the price,
please. Yeah. And also, Kieran mentions you get copper nutrients from the immersion chiller, which is useful for yeast health.
Well, in the old days, they used to put in the latons on the arm. They used to put a copper strip because the copper actually bound the sulfurs. So when you have a fermentation, the hydrogen sulfide in that actually get bound and then actually gets taken out. So you actually get a beer that's quite clean, especially in lagers and things. And then every year, when a copper plate was worn away, they would just replace the copper plate. It's part of the brewer's process vessel. They're not adding anything, but technically
it's a consumable. Who leaves beer for weeks, Cam? This is going back to your cubing method. And then David says a mate of his kept his wort for 2 years in a cube and then fermented it. He sent him a bottle a few months ago and it was okay. Well, he's still alive anyway.
Well, I mean, if it was sterile, essentially you've got an extra kit in that cube.
But remember that you have to remember that plastic is permeable, though. So I mean, like to a certain extent. So
I'm not sure. I mean, those are quite thick HDP cubes. It's
Yeah,
not
but
like
over,
Quite thick.
PET bottle, which PET bottles are very oxygen permeable.
but over 2 years, that's going to be,
Sure.
there's
Yeah.
going to, some oxygen will get in for sure.
Fair enough.
I would say, from my day job knowledge. Same problem with vanilla fading. Yeah, no, vanilla is definitely volatile. Eh?
And last I checked, it was very difficult to source. I don't know.
Okay, here's a question.
It's like now, but sure.
Yeah, and expensive as well. Eh?
Yeah.
Here's a question for everybody. What is the most difficult beer you guys have ever brewed? Start from, how's this looking? Start from Danie, Matt, and then Cam, in that order.
Sure. I think there's a few challenges. For me, one of the big things is there's flavor balances. For stouts, for me, the balance around getting something that is very drinkable without that burnt, harsh note. So actually getting your raw material inputs correct is very, very important. And tasted stuff at Warthog's meetings, at the homebrew meetings in the league tasting, which I thought was phenomenal, the way that they actually balance the raw materials. And coming back home, I've always tried to match that. I do think brewing with non-normal kind of raw materials is definitely a lot more challenging. When you can't use your normal lautering techniques, you can't use your normal conversion techniques. I think that is challenging. Myself, I love tasting a sour beer, but I will not do it at home. So in that sense, I don't have that experience of actually doing a sour beer. So I think that for me is quite a challenge. Why
won't you do it? For what reason?
Just my whole life, I've been rebelling against and killing and cleaning. Just putting lactobacillus into one of my fermenters just goes against everything that I am as a brewer.
And in the kettle?
So that's the one thing. I actually want to do a kettle sour because I think that's quite controlled in a way that you can kettle sour to a certain pH, boil it, and then you ferment normally. So that's the one I'm prepared to try. But if you go to Soul Barrel, yes, make some awesome beers there.
Yeah.
Every time I'm down in Cape, it's one of the places I go and visit because just getting that balance right is so.
I love mixed beers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
fantastic.
Jeez. I think making a good sour beer is an art, and it's something that I haven't mastered yet myself.
I think kettle sour is a great one to start with, and people see it as cheating, but I mean it's a very traditional method of souring beers, going back to Goses or Berliner Weisses or whatever, So I don't think it's cheating. I think it's a great
that's how they
process.
do sours, huh? So,
yeah, and you also you kind of taking that chance factor or that risk factor out of brewing, because you throw a beer into a barrel to sour, you don't quite know how it's going to come out, right? And whereas if you're kettling it, you don't need to invest a year or two into the life of that beer just to find out that it didn't work. I like kettle souring, as you can tell. Matt, challenging beer.
Yeah, so for me, it's actually as simple as an amber ale. I brewed an amber ale as my first beer when I started homebrewing in 2014. And it took me at least 2 or 3 years to find the perfect recipe that I enjoyed. It seems like such a simple beer, but so I don't know. There's just so many elements going on to balance an amber ale that it took me so long to kind of tweak everything and get it right. So,
but isn't that the case with a lot of simple beers? Like they're one of the more, like even like lagers. They're very difficult to get right because there's nowhere to hide, right? I like beers where you can hide with shitloads of hops or shitloads of sourness or fruit or whatever, and then you can hide how crap a brewer you really are, behind all that flavor.
So I've brewed a Pilsner, and that turned out perfectly first time. And I thought black IPA would also be very difficult, but I didn't struggle with that. I've never brewed a Weiss, but I've heard that is quite a difficult style to brew in terms of getting the balance right. But for me, just personally, amber ale was my kind of beer that I had to tweak for the longest and try and get right for a year or two to actually get it to where I wanted it to be. So yeah, sometimes the simple things are the most difficult. I think
Yeah,
that's
the thing
a
with-
lesson from brewing as well. Yeah.
The thing with Weiss beers with me, I like the obscene Weiss beers where they're like proper high on the bubblegummy banana esters. So that's easy to get right because you can just go hot.
Yeah, just leave it near the fridge and you'll be fine.
And then Cam, what have you brewed that's been the most challenging?
Yeah, so actually interesting to hear these two. I'm glad I got to go last. I think 'cause there's a difference between which beers are difficult to brew and which beers are difficult to brew well. So my most challenging brew days have typically been the ones that use alternative grains. So you have to do cereal mashes or decoctions or like multiple like iterative mashes, things like that to try and get through the brew day. There's some real challenges there. And I mean, I actually had one recently that I ended up throwing away. Killed my grandfather. That damn trip out just kept tripping every 2 minutes. I couldn't get it up to a boil. And that was rye malt. I'm never going to touch rye malt again. I want nothing more to do with it.
No more than 10%, huh? No more than 10%.
So this brew was 50% rye, and
Oh,
it-
whoa.
No.
There's the little secret in there, 50%.
so
I've
that one-
made whiskey washes with more than 50% rye malt and not really had an issue. So
This
it's
is
on the
exactly
grain
what I've
bar as
heard.
well.
So I
Yeah,
think
but you didn't have to drink that wort, huh? So
No, but I mean,
This
I
thought-
actually couldn't. I physically didn't get through the brew day. The grandfather was tripping out every 30 seconds because, and I think the rye was too finely ground, and it was scorching on the bottom. And I lived an 8-hour brew day, and I threw it down the drain.
Awful. I'm sorry to hear it, Gav.
So on that subject as well, anyone tried mashing sorghum malt and unmalted barley? Before the suppliers opened up, Pick and Pay was selling both of it.
No, that sounds like a bad idea.
Sorghum malt with unmalted barley. How much convertible enzymes are in sorghum malt?
The problem with a lot of the stuff you get in the supermarket is it's king corn, and king corn's enzyme content is very variable.
Right.
So, and also king corn has got a lot more alpha amylase than beta amylase, but concentration is a lot lower. So you got to give a lot more time. So when I brew with sorghum, you got to taste it. You got to taste with the sweetness, how sweet it is versus latent sweetness. Because I mean, the longer the chain sugars are, the less sweet it tastes, but you can get this like sweetness afterwards that get in there. And generally, when I brew with sorghum and mealie meal and all those kind of things, I generally do a starch test as well, just to confirm. So I extend the time a lot longer. So generally, I can, if I do a malt brew, I do maybe 40 minutes conversion time, 40 to 60 minutes. But when I do sorghum and those kind of things, it can go up to an hour and a half. Easy.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And it all depends.
If you're using anything with low in enzymes, a much longer mash will get. I've actually ended up with a 4-hour mash once before I had full conversion.
The big thing is you got to go and have a look at the gelatinization temperatures. So you can actually download a table on whatever raw material you're using. So if you look at sorghum, the gelatinization is generally most of the starch will gelatinize from 71 onwards. So you can get up to 75. And that's why generally, if you're using maize, cassava, sorghum, those kind of things, you basically do a decoction. So you can actually boil it through. You basically liquefy it so it doesn't turn into a porridge. And then you boil it, you gelatinize everything. And then you bring it back into your main main in your mash. And you do the conversion then. So then you do your, your kind of sacrification stand in that. Otherwise, you get only like 40, 50, 60% of your starches converted and the rest stays behind. And then what you get when you pour the beer in a glass, you actually get a starch haze in there. And you get a very cloudy product that actually comes through from that.
And New England IPA.
Oh, maybe that's the way to go, huh? So
There we go.
So
the thing is, Mike was saying, if you're using an unmalted product with a malted product, particularly one that's got low enzymes, that conversion is going to take longer. So
for sure,
because the enzymes will eventually get there. It just takes a lot longer.
Yeah, because I mean, if you're taking an unmalted product, there's no enzymes there. So if you're taking something with low enzymes, you have to give it a lot of time because it's the enzyme substrate reaction. You need to give it then lots of time to actually do that conversion. Otherwise, if you try and latte that and it's got starch in it, you're going to get a clogged lattering, and you're actually going to get very, very slow latterings. And never mind that sorghum doesn't have husk, so you don't get lattering capability. If you use sorghum, use rice hulls or oat hulls, add a whole bunch of that in as well.
Those things are so difficult to get hold of in South Africa.
It is, for sure.
Always like, yeah. Or you can use unmilled grain as well, hey? Unmilled like SAB grain or something cheap that's not going to add anything to the flavor instead of rice sauce.
What I've used previously in Zambia when we were using high sorghum and cassava brews, what we would do is we would add the previous would be a malt brew, and then we would take the spent grain from that and mix with that brew. It still gives you serious trouble lattering it, but you can latter it. So don't think you can get on a major scale. Generally, you're talking about 2 to 3 hour lattering. If you're talking about 40,000 liters. When you do it that way around, you still get about 6 hour lattering. So it's still longer, but you can get it through.
One of the guys in our homebrew club said that he holds back and he actually just dries it out in the oven, and he throws 20% of his previous grain bill, like the spent grain from his previous bill, into every brew instead of trying to do rice hulls or whatever.
No.
Yeah, I've done that as well. In South Africa, we did a product where we actually used dried spent grain, and we actually put that in, and that worked quite well actually. So so that works quite well as well.
I just use it for bread, the spent grain.
I feed my ducks with it.
It makes awesome like Anzac cookies, or I haven't done a bread with it, but lots of great break products.
My ducks actually know when we're brewing now. They come by the gate. They can smell the brew day.
Wow.
Albie and Jake's.
Yeah.
They've got donkeys on the farm, and when they brew, the donkeys go ballistic.
They love it. They're not stupid.
They love spent grain. So
going back to the head retention issue, Cam. Rick says that dextrin malt from Simpsons can help with the head retention there.
Okay, awesome.
I think Rick works for Africa Hops.
Yeah, I know Rick.
So also
pills as well.
Whenever you've got some roasted products, the melanoidins in that actually help to stabilize the foam bubble. So that's why generally your stouts and those kind of things generally give you a better foam head on top as well. So
it's literally just in my Flanders. Normally I don't have a head retention issue. It's just in this one that I can't get it to hang around.
Cool, guys.
Flavor is more important than head retention, though, right?
Yeah, look, I think in a sour beer.
Soon, I think.
I think we're going to wrap up, but you can get another glass and have some dinner with it. I think in a sour beer, though, for me, I don't know. Like head retention is not like it's the last tick box on the list.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. I'm looking at that last tick box now for my next for when I decant out the casks next time. What do I need to do differently to get head retention for the next batch in 12 months' time?
Because I think on the whole, most people will accept poor head retention on a sour, even though
I wouldn't expect good head retention on a sour. So
but I was disappointed with that sour beer that we did, the one I brought up to you, Danie, the sweet birthday baby one with the head retention on it, because the homebrew or the small batch version of that beer we did had amazing head retention, and then we did it on a bigger scale and it had like almost zero head retention. So it was
translating from small scale to big scale is very problematic. Huh? So when you do a brew on a grainfather and you do it then on 500 liter scale or something like that, it's very, very different. So
you don't just multiply by 25. Yeah,
so, yeah.
It's different.
Yeah. So I do tend to, on the grainfather, probably more often stir in anytime the protein, the foam rises to the top, I'll stir it back into the beer, and that probably has a bit of an impact on the better head retention towards the end, maybe. And on a commercial batch, maybe we don't do that enough.
Yeah.
I don't know. Because you don't tend to stir boils on a commercial batch. You let the...
Who knows?
Yeah.
Too many variables.
On the grainfather, I usually scoop that off, and I still don't have a problem with head.
Do you? You skip it off? You want one of those? You're not making a broth, Cam. not making a consomme.
That's how I want my beer. Crystal clear.
Hop,
It's quite
stop,
funny.
pale ale.
It was funny how his internet broke up when he said crystal clear there. It sounded like a...
Absolutely.
Right, guys. I think we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much for joining us. That was an awesome in-depth knowledge. And if anybody watching wants more information on getting started, then definitely contact your local homebrew club. If you're in Cape Town, SouthYeasters, in the Helderberg region, Helderberg Homebrew Club, Joburg, the Warthogs, Durban Homebrewing Club, Eastern Cape, PE, there's the Eastern Cape Homebrewing Club. So yeah, plenty of them, but search them out and get some knowledge. Those guys will definitely help you out, right?
Yeah. Cheers.
Even during the times where we can't get together and meet up, you've had virtual meetings and everything. Yeah.
We've done. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So definitely get in touch with them. Get some knowledge and get into home brewing. It's a lot of fun, and right now it's the only way to have beer. So get into it.
Yeah. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks, Matt.
Cheers,
Thanks, Cam.
So much, Mike. Cheers, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, Danie. Thanks for your
guys.
time. Really appreciate it. Cheers. So thanks for tuning in. Check us again next week. We'll have another video on with some more brewers. And until then, cheers.
Cheers.